This is the Logitech G Cloud, their answer to the Nintendo Switch and the Steam Deck. It promises a lot, from instant gameplay with a pick-up-and-play style experience, a much lighter design at just 463 grams, that's over 30% lighter than the Steam Deck, and you also get up to 12 hours of battery life, and because the games are all rendered remotely, there's no fan or overheating to worry about. Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Now, cloud gaming as a concept isn't exactly new, but for those that don't know, instead of your game being rendered on your device, like a Steam Deck, the game is actually running on the little processor that's inside here, the game is rendered on a much more powerful server, and the video of that game is being streamed back to you just like a Netflix stream is. The only difference is that your inputs on the controls are getting sent back to the server to change what happens on screen, aka you playing the game. The catch to all of this, of course, is that you need an internet connection for this thing to work, and a good one at that. The better the connection, the better the experience. Although if you have, say, an Xbox or gaming PC at your house, you can actually stream your games locally so that you can enjoy your favourite titles from the comfort of the sofa, your bed, or wherever, rather than only at your PC or console. Let's take a look at this thing up close. Starting with the display, which is a 7-inch IPS LCD with a claimed 450 nits of peak brightness. It's 60Hz, which matches most streaming services. I used Moonlight to do a bit of display testing, including testing with my Datacolor Spider X, and that reported that the IPS panel here covers around 94% of the sRGB spectrum. That's pretty good, and considerably better than the Steam Deck too. Impressively, at full brightness, it actually managed nearly 550 nits of brightness, almost 100 nits higher than their claim, which is fantastic. Interestingly, it managed a contrast ratio of almost 1400 to 1, which is really very impressive for an IPS panel. Accuracy was impressive too. I tested using the extended accuracy test and saw a delta E average of just 1.19, with only a single shade of blue breaking through the delta E of 2 threshold. That's excellent. Naturally, I also used my open source response time tool, which you can now buy at Versatility.com, by the way, to measure the panel's response time. Here are those results, and yeah, I don't think that I've seen that much red before in one of these charts. Now, technically, this is a little misleading, because the G Cloud's panel is only running at 60Hz, meaning the refresh rate window is actually 16.7 milliseconds. While the average is considerably more than that, at around 23.5 milliseconds, that is still under 2 frames of latency, meaning despite this being as slow as molasses, well, you shouldn't actually see much ghosting. It won't exactly be a sharp image though, that's for sure. Inside, you've got a Snapdragon 720G chip. That's a 2020 budget chip you'll find in something like the Samsung A52. It's not exactly a powerhouse, but if all this thing is meant to do is stream games, it's perfectly fine. And it pairs well with a 23 watt-hour battery that seems to get around 8 hours or so of screen on time in my testing. Strangely, you only get 4 GB of RAM to go with this though. You do have 64 gigs of onboard storage and a microSD card slot up at the top under a little flap, and you'll also find a USB-C port on the bottom as well as a 4-pole headphone jack. It's worth noting that that USB-C port is only for charging and for things like USB-C headphones and adapters, not for display output. You can't hook this thing up to a TV to share your games with friends. It's very much a solo gaming experience. Size-wise, much in the same way that it's considerably lighter than the Steam Deck, it's much smaller and slimmer too. It's got grips that are textured for, well, grip, but it follows a much sleeker profile. The triggers at the top, for example, are markedly thin, and the spacing for the controls is much more akin to a Nintendo Switch than a Steam Deck. Of course, since they didn't need to fit all the powerful hardware inside of it, well, it's considerably and noticeably lighter. Especially for my wife, who did the majority of the testing on this, she found it a much more bearable experience compared to the larger and heavier Steam Deck. When it comes to actually playing the games, you have quite the selection. The most prominent feature, of course, is Xbox Game Pass, which includes their cloud gaming feature. That means pretty much any game that's available through Game Pass, including Xbox 360 titles, can be played on this. Want to fire up Skate 3 and do a sick frontside 540 shifty tail grab down the super ultra mega park death ramp? Right on, dude. If you would rather not pay Microsoft your money, you can sign up for a GeForce Now subscription instead and play the games that you hopefully already own through a platform like Steam or Epic Games. If that's not enough though, you can also install Amazon's Luna platform or even stream from a device that you already own, like an Xbox or PC locally, the latter either via Steam Link or Moonlight. The actual gaming experience varies quite a lot depending on the game and streaming source that you use. My wife enjoyed playing A Garden Story, a cute game where you play as a little grape in a sort of 2D action-adventure RPG, which actually played really well on the G Cloud, likely thanks to the fact that it's a fairly slow-paced and sort of low-precision game. It's not too sensitive to latency or the mushy controls on the cloud. She found the Game Pass to be the best part by far though. Being able to try out basically any game she wanted for as long as she wanted is quite a unique experience. And of course, not having to install them, spend all that time and, storage space, that sort of stuff, is also pretty great too. Impressively, the load-in times are actually relatively fast and relatively short for most titles, although she did find it frustrating to have the video glitch and lag sometimes, or actually somewhat often. Although the battery life was excellent. She never felt like she had to go out of her way to charge it and only needed topping it up every couple of days. On the latency front though, this is where things get interesting. As an absolute best case scenario, I used Moonlight to stream from a desktop locally and used OSRTT to measure the total system latency, or in this case actually the on-display latency. OSRTT reckons that you'll get around 58 milliseconds of latency on average. Now, that is not the absolute worst. I'd actually call that slow but relatively playable. And considering that this is a 60Hz display, it's incredibly common to see that sort of latency time, especially among console devices, including the Steam Deck. I wouldn't want to try and play competitive or rhythm games with it, but for anything more casual, that's perfectly fine. But from a streaming service though, oh boy, that's bad. Nvidia's GeForce Now service seemed to perform the best for me, averaging around 155 milliseconds when switching cameras in Art of Rally. For context, the Steam Deck, playing the exact same game and doing the same action, takes just 60 milliseconds to do the same thing. That is not far off a third of the time. Or put it the other way, the G Cloud streaming from GeForce Now is almost 3 times slower. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, trying to steer in Art of Rally was almost impossible, as you can't accurately control how much you've already turned in and end up hunting back and forth just to stay in a straight line. This is the perfect console-style game to play on this, but with this much lag, it wasn't exactly a great time. And when it comes to Xbox Cloud Gaming, it's so much worse. Playing Skate 3 just to have your character get on and off their board took an average of around 355 milliseconds to start registering. For some context here, that is almost twice my standard human reaction time. As in, I can react to visual stimulus twice in that time. If you thought trying to steer with 150 milliseconds of latency was bad, just wait until you double that and then some. There was no way that I could complete any challenges with this. Sure, you can try tricking around a little if you want to, but trying to accurately steer down a ramp or time a late flip was just impossible. Now, you might argue that, well, that's an Xbox 360, possibly emulated game, and that might be adding some more latency that a native PC title wouldn't see. And sure, you're right. Playing Forza Horizon 5 via Xbox Cloud Gaming was faster, with an average input latency of 235 milliseconds. Yeah, almost 100 milliseconds slower than GeForce Now, and 4 times slower than streaming locally or playing on a Steam Deck. To say that that was impossible to play with any level of enjoyment would be an understatement. Of course, the elephant in the room here is the versatility that most handheld consoles offer, which is distinctly lacking in the G Cloud. Because of its tethered nature, either to your own network or to the internet at large, anywhere that doesn't have a rock-solid, fast connection means that this thing is practically useless. Sure, you can play Android games, but guess what? So can your phone. If you want to game on a road trip, you're out of luck. Want your kids to have a distraction at their grand's house, which only has an aging ADSL 2 megabit per second connection? Yeah, that's not going to happen either. And let's say you're traveling and the hotel that you're staying at has painfully slow Wi-Fi. Well, looks like your portable games console doesn't work. The obvious contrast to locally rendered consoles like the Steam Deck or Nintendo Switch is that they'll work just fine without an internet connection at all. I mean, sure, especially on Steam, some games are pretty picky about having a connection for their DRM, but any connection would work fine there. Hotspot from your phone if you really need to, but I mean, 9 times out of 10, you wouldn't even need to think about it. The local play nature also means that you avoid all latency issues. It's playing right there on the device, so yeah, it's going to be pretty much instant. Sure, you do need to deal with the heat and noise of something like the Steam Deck, but when the latency is under a 10th as much, that makes a pretty big difference to the whole gaming experience thing. It goes from practically unplayable to perfectly fine. When it comes to the game library, while Game Pass seems like a limitless source of titles, you don't actually own any of them. If you have to cut your expenses down for a few months and you decide that the ongoing subscription to Game Pass is one that you can live without, well, on the G Cloud, you now don't have any games to play. If you'd bought them on something like Steam, then you could still play them, assuming you have a PC on your network to game on. Otherwise, you're still stuck paying a subscription to Nvidia instead. There's also a limit to what titles you can find on Game Pass. Want to play Cyberpunk 2077? Sorry, that's not in the library. Shadow of the Tomb Raider? Sorry, it's not in the library. Grand Theft Auto 5? Sorry, best we can do is Paw Patrol Grand Prix. What about Rust or War Thunder? Euro Truck Simulator 2? Sorry, it's not there. Now, this isn't a problem on a PC or a console like the Steam Deck or ROG Ally, because you can just play those games locally through Steam. I mean, you can do that too on the G Cloud, but you'll have to fork out another £9 or £18 per month to play those games that you still have to buy on Steam, mind you, via GeForce Now. Something that I find starkly missing that I love so much about the Steam Deck is emulation. The Deck isn't the most powerful console in the world, but it can play games from almost any console you like. It can even do PS3 games with the right tweaks. It'll run Xbox 360 titles if you install Windows to a microSD card, and of course it will do Switch, Wii, GameCube, Game Boy, and well, kind of everything else games too. I've spent a considerable amount of time with my Deck playing a load of different Pokemon games. But that's not possible on the G Cloud, save for maybe an Android emulator to play Game Boy games, which, thanks to the budget CPU, likely wouldn't be the best experience and would definitely get the better of the battery too. I don't think that I can emphasize just quite how much I dislike subscription services. Being beholden to someone like Microsoft to not only let you have access to a game library, but to actually run those games means that if you can't afford the fee, you lose access. If Microsoft decides, much like Google did with Stadia, that Game Pass cloud gaming just isn't worth it for them, then this becomes e-waste. I mean, sure, you can move over to GeForce Now, but then you would have to buy all the games through platforms like Steam on top of the new subscription fees. If you're using this purely to stream locally, then awesome, more power to you. Although for considerably less money, you could get a cheap Android tablet and a little controller grip, which would perform pretty similarly. Again, the obvious contrast here is that local play devices like the Deck don't have any ongoing fees. Games are on sale a whole lot, so you can pick up a year's worth of games for a handful of months worth of subscription fees. And that's not to mention emulated titles. Equally, if you're the sort of person to buy a Steam Deck or ROG Ally, you likely already have a healthy games library on a platform like Steam, which are all yours to play whenever and wherever, so long as Valve exists, I guess. While the NDA that I signed when Logitech offered me this G Cloud to review and provided me both a code for GeForce Now and Xbox Game Pass Ultimate means that I can't show you the slide deck that they gave me, I can tell you that Logitech views the G Cloud as a AAA and hardcore game machine. They say that the Steam Deck costs at least $449, but could be over $1,000, not including the four $60 games you'll obviously have to buy. And you know, when you compare that to the $350 for the G Cloud and $15 a month for Game Pass Ultimate, that's only like $529 for the first year. And then another $180, and then another, and another. And that's assuming that you only pay for Game Pass. Honestly, that slide really rubbed me the wrong way, and I'm very sorry that I can't show it to you. But I think that highlights what Logitech thinks this thing is. They see it as a new space to occupy where gaming is in the cloud, man. And their glorified Android tablet with a controller built in is the gateway to that new paradise. Sure, the fact that it's not locked to any one platform is good for the whole Stadia-like shutdown problem that has plagued the game streaming industry for like 2 decades at this point. If you're too young to know about OnLive, go look it up. But it also means that the device itself isn't inherently all that special. Sure, their fancy launcher dashboard is nice enough. I mean, there's no app switching. It closes your games if you even accidentally brush the lock slider on the top. And you have to know that the Y button is what you press to close the app just to be able to reboot it if it locks itself in a weird sort of login cycle. Also, the Microsoft like Xbox Game Pass logs you out every time you close the device. Really annoying. But I mean, hey, the dashboard looks cool, right? But I mean, beyond that skin, it's a budget Android tablet. It's way too small for me personally. It's actually actively uncomfortable for me, and my god, the triggers at the top are anemic. The spacing between the right joystick and the ABXY buttons is too small for my larger hands, although of course that's all subjective and based on your hand size. The Steam Deck fits me like a glove, but sadly this doesn't. And there's also the whole latency problem. In a game like Skate 3, I couldn't play it properly. Trying to accurately aim my character when it takes almost half a second to register any change in movement is just impossible. And that sort of issue was common across pretty much every game. We also had video bitrate issues, like everything would be fine and then the image would turn into a pixelated mess for a bit, and then go back to normal. There'd also be weird glitches like this, where a large part of the frame would just completely bug out or stick or just, break. All from Xbox Game Pass Ultimate too. The fact that this lacks the ability to output to a TV makes it even less appealing. I've spent just as much time playing games with my friends and family on my TV with my Steam Deck as I have playing it solo. I spent plenty of time playing, group Switch games on a big screen too, which is always a good time. None of that is even possible with this. It's more like a Switch Lite, but that's almost half the price now, And it works while traveling. Realistically, I don't think that the Steam Deck and G Cloud are comparable devices. They don't offer the same experience or much in the way of overlapping use cases. Sure, they are both handheld devices you play games on, but that's about it for similarities. The Steam Deck is basically a PC in a handheld console format. It can dock to be a desktop, offer a friends and family big screen gaming experience, or be a solo game machine. It can play anything on Steam, and with a little work, can play games from almost any console, and even platforms like Epic can work too. The G Cloud lets you stream games from cloud services in the same way that a laptop with an Xbox controller or an Android tablet with a controller grip would. If it's not obvious, I can't say that I'm the biggest fan of the G Cloud. Cloud gaming in general seems like a bit of a fad to me anyway, and having to pay even the currently discounted $300 price tag is way too much for basically the same functionality as downloading the Xbox Cloud Gaming app to your phone and buying a Razer Kishi V2 controller grip. The Steam Deck is special because Valve made it. The RG Ally is special because of the hardware inside it. The G Cloud, well, it just isn't all that special. Just to make it abundantly clear though, if a service like Xbox Cloud Gaming, Shadow, Nvidia GeForce Now, Amazon Luna, any of the other game streaming services works for you, then that's fantastic. Go and enjoy whatever works. And you of course don't have to listen to an idiot on YouTube tell you anything else. Even if something like the G Cloud is the perfect device for you, again, if that means that it outweighs the negatives that I may or may not be presenting here, then that's fantastic. Go buy one and enjoy it. I know that a lot of people said about Google Stadia that the sort of pick up and play style, that the convenience factor was well worth the added costs and other drawbacks of that platform and ecosystem. And so if you're in that sort of position, if this device or these services end up being the best solution for you, then that's fantastic. I have no problem with that at all. I have some, what I hope you would agree are some legitimate concerns and sorts of issues with those services and products. But if those concerns and issues don't matter to you as much as they do for me, then that's perfectly fine. Of course, with that said, those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. What do you think about the G Cloud? Is it something you would pick up yourself? And if so, why would you pick one of these up over a Steam Deck, a Nintendo Switch, RG Ally, or any of the other handheld gaming consoles? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on Xbox Cloud Gaming and GeForce Now, those sorts of game streaming platforms. Let me know if you have any experience with them and what that's been like in those comments too. If you are interested in picking up a Logitech G Cloud, I will leave a link to it in the description if you want to take a look. And that's kind of it. If you want to see more videos like this one, more sort of general tech reviews, more content with the Steam Deck, or even with the G Cloud, if you have any suggestions, feel free to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification icon. Check out plenty of other videos on the end cards, including plenty of videos about the Steam Deck. And that's kind of it. If you want to support the channel, you can do so through YouTube, Patreon, pick up a hoodie or t-shirt like this one, or a load of other ones that I designed myself. Or there's also a load of other affiliate links that don't cost you anything extra to use, but do help me out when you use them. Otherwise, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you on the next video.